Mark Shim's tenor sound is, I mean, in his generation, I think he's the only one who has that kind of depth, that kind of size of his sound, and that kind of, you know, when I hear his sound, I hear all these different references. I hear Joe Henderson, I hear Billy Harper, I hear Coleman Hawkins. Somehow each of these guys has a sound that has all these nuances and textures, and that makes me think of a lot of other music, a lot of other people. I think it's partly because each of them has had a really long and interesting career. Mark Shim played with Betty Carter and with Elvin Jones, and he recorded for Blue Note. You know, he has a lot of wisdom from contact with some of the legends of this music. Graham Haynes is a legend of this music, and his father is a true legend. I mean, his father is Roy Haynes, so he comes from that musical legacy. He's been around many generations of musicians his entire life. And in the 90s, I became really kind of obsessed with his recordings, long before I met him, even. I was a fan. One of my favorite albums from the 90s is Graham's record called Griot's Footsteps. And he has a certain relationship to time that's very mysterious. I remember when I had him come up as faculty at the Banff workshop a few summers ago. He gave a workshop, and the title of it was "Time Does Not Exist." And so there's a quality in his playing where you actually hear that sort of sensibility. I mean, his rhythm is, you know, he's the son of Roy Haynes, so it's not like he has no sense of time. It's more that he has this kind of sense of form that's really expansive. And so you hear it in his improvisations, that he takes the long view on everything. And he achieves a lot with sound, so that he can just play one note and it can kind of speak volumes. Steve Lehman, I met him in 1999. He was playing with Anthony Braxton's ensemble, and I was playing with my band. It was one of my first gigs in Europe as a leader. I remember he turned my head even then with his sound and his choice of improvisational language, just his identity on the alto saxophone. Again, it kind of conjured up a lot of associations. Braxton himself, but also Jackie McLean, whom he also studied with. And I also heard a sort of compositional wisdom in the way he improvised, and I could hear it. He had a certain, also a kind of long view, and it's not that he was unhurried when he played, but that his approach to form was very interesting. It was not what you would expect. You know, I think there's a certain kind of burning alto player sort of sound that people are used to hearing. Kenny Garrett or Cannonball Adderley, you know, to speak across generations. And the reason that they called him Cannonball was because it sounded like he was this kind of man-eater on the saxophone. And Steve has that quality, you know, in the sense that his, you know, technical fluidity and this sort of like acerbic kind of sound, it cuts, you know. But there's also the way he puts solos together, the way he puts lines together, the choices he makes. You hear that there's some other information in there. And so that's kind of what I noticed when I first heard him and why I sought to work with him. And I've worked with him pretty steadily since 2003. We've been in this group called Fieldwork together since then. So all these guys I have a long history with and a deep admiration for. And together, it's a pretty incendiary combination. Well, I've worked with Tyshawn since the early 2000s. He was in my quartet for a while with Stephan and Rudresh Mahantapa. And we made an album called Blood Sutra that came out in 2002. And at the end of 2004, he joined Fieldwork. And since then, I've been working with Tyshawn constantly in a lot of different contexts. Fieldwork, he subs in my trio. He, you know, and also in the quartet with Rudresh when we were still active in that format. He's on Radhe Radhe, which is the film that we released a couple of years ago on ECM Records. I guess we just have this long and deep, very personal history. It's like we're kind of soulmates of a certain kind, you know. I was just telling him as he left, I said, well, what would I do without you? And he said the same. Oh, he's one of the greatest musicians in the world. It's not even a question. You know, a lot of drummers are like this, that have perfect pitch and total recall and just have this sort of omniscient kind of listening skill. And it's not often talked about, but a lot of drummers sort of quietly have that quality. Jeff Tain Watts is like that. Jack DeJohnette, Tony Williams was like that. Being hyper aware of everything that's happening in the ensemble. And that's actually the real history of this music, which is very hard to talk about in words because we don't have a lot of good language for talking about rhythm. The whole history of drumming is really the history of this music. And Tyshawn's right in that legacy. I mean, you know, he studied with Billy Hart and with Ralph Peterson, but he's also had this, he's been tapping into a lot of different information since he was a teenager. When he first came over to my house, he sat down at the piano and started playing some Stockhausen Klavierstücke, you know, just casually. So yeah, this is the sixth one, you know, stuff like that. And he was basically doing it by ear, you know. So, I mean, and he studied composition at Columbia. He'll have a doctorate in composition very shortly, and he's going to be a professor of music at Wesleyan. So he has this total view of music, you know, and drumming is just, it's sort of like the main avenue through which he channels that. But he's also a brilliant composer. And again, like talk about this like vision for time and understanding of time and understanding of memory and of form, how form and memory are related and how it works through time. He's sort of a wizard with that, so he can also really take a long view on things and build very methodically over a large span of time. But then on top of that, he's got some of the most incredible technical virtuosity as a drummer, just sheerly as a drummer. And his groove is really, I mean, his pocket is so deep and has all this impeccable knowledge of polyrhythms and ability, just like his not just natural, I mean, because he worked at it too. He's been working at it for most of his life. But that combination of natural gifts and real dedication and hard work that he has is pretty unparalleled. I mean, I don't think that, I mean, any drummer who's heard him or who's aware of him is really, people want to get next to him and learn from him. Stephan I've worked with basically since I moved to New York. You know, I kind of reached out to him out of the blue back in '99, and he just made himself available, even though he didn't know me from Adam. And I think he just felt that there was something there that would broaden his horizons. And, you know, so we've been working together pretty constantly since then. And he's been on a bunch of my albums. He's in the trio, and he was in the quartet. And, you know, we've had a kind of reliable and very strong working relationship over these years. It's built up, and he has this great memory for all of the material that we've done, and he also has a way of making it simple, you know. I think it's often said that my music is complicated, but when he plays it, he brings a kind of just a lyricism to it and a simplicity to it, and a kind of, he's able to back off from all the technical details and sort of just treat it as a shape and as a feeling. And that's what it needs, you know.